Welcome to US Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: with allies like Elon Musk and US Congress, Ukraine knows it may increasingly need to rely on itself. Banners purportedly from Mexico's Sinaloa cartel say gang has sworn off sales of fentanyl. Michael Klein's SPAC to cease operations 3 years after going public. House Republican duo calls for fraud probe into federal anti-poverty program. A tough year for dividend stocks puts lots of big names on sale. With allies like Elon Musk and US Congress, Ukraine knows it may increasingly need to rely on itself. The Toronto Star. Ukraine is increasingly looking towards self-sufficiency as support from Western allies dwindles. Kyiv remains heavily reliant on foreign financial support to fight Russian troops and deliver services to its citizens. However, with some countries threatening to withdraw military support, Ukraine is starting to move towards self-sufficiency. Establishing a domestic industry for the production of military hardware is one example of this shift. The transition will be difficult, but necessary more than a year and a half after the Russian invasion. The US Congress is now expected to take up legislation to provide another $24 billion for Ukraine's fight against Russian forces, and Slovakia's parliamentary elections were won in part on a promise to end military support for Ukraine. As the conflict with Russia continues without the promise of clear victory, it is becoming harder to spend taxpayer dollars on a costly, far-off war. Ukraine's allies are increasingly viewing the conflict as Ukraine's problem to manage. Reports of corruption have fueled the argument that money is being wasted on a foreign conflict. However, measures are in place to prevent corruption, and there are many who understand the self-interest at play when countries support Ukraine. Banners purportedly from Mexico's Sinaloa cartel say gang has sworn off sales of fentanyl. The Toronto Star. Banners signed by a faction of Mexico's Sinaloa drug cartel appeared in northern Mexico on Monday, claiming that the gang has stopped the production and sale of the synthetic opioid fentanyl. However, experts quickly cast doubt on the veracity of the claim, stating that fentanyl remains one of the cartel's biggest money makers. Mike Vigil, former head of international operations for the Drug Enforcement Administration, said that there is concrete evidence that Sinaloa is the biggest producer of fentanyl in Mexico and that there has been no sign the cartel is moving away from it. Michael Klein's SPAC to cease operations 3 years after going public. Reuters. Churchill Capital Corp V, a blank check company led by veteran dealmaker Michael Klein, has announced that it will cease operations. The company, which went public nearly 3 years ago, had been involved in several special purpose acquisition companies, SPACs, during the pandemic-era boom. However, increased regulatory scrutiny and a poor market for new listings last year have dampened the appeal of SPACs. Churchill Capital raised $500 million in its initial public offering in December 2020 and will now return the capital to shareholders. House Republican duo calls for fraud probe into federal anti-poverty program. The Toronto Star. 2 Republican members of Congress have called on the U.S. federal government to investigate potential fraud in its Temporary Assistance for Needy Families (TANF) program. In a letter to Comptroller General Jean Dodoro, the congressman said the Government Accountability Office should review non-assistance spending in the program, which provides around $16.5 billion in federal funding to states for services intended to help families who cannot afford their basic needs. A tough year for dividend stocks puts lots of big names on sale. The Globe and Mail. Dividend-paying stocks have underperformed this year, with the stocks with the highest dividend yields being among the poorest performers. However, dividend investing still plays a crucial role in long-term equity returns. For example, a $100 investment in the Toronto Stock Exchange benchmark in 1956 would have grown to $29,000 with dividends, compared to just $3,600 without dividends. The underperformance of dividend stocks can be attributed to rising bond yields. Nobel Prize for Physiology or Medicine awarded to scientists whose work enabled mRNA COVID-19 vaccines. ABC. Hungarian scientist Katalin Karikó and U.S. scientist Drew Weissman have been awarded the 2023 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for their discoveries enabling the development of mRNA COVID-19 vaccines. The Nobel Assembly of the Karolinska Institute Medical University in Sweden selected the laureates, who will also receive 11 million Swedish crowns, approximately $1.56 million. The scientists' work involved finding a way to prevent the immune system from launching an inflammatory reaction against lab-made mRNA, which was previously seen as a major hurdle in using mRNA therapeutically. The remaining Nobel Prizes will be announced in the coming days. Laurentian Bank is hit again, but its peers aren't doing any better. The Globe and Mail. Laurentian Bank CEO, Ronnie Llewellyn, has left the bank after 3 years in the role. The announcement comes shortly after the bank's customer service outage during IT maintenance and its failure to attract a buyer after putting itself up for sale in July. Laurentian Bank's stock price dropped 5.9% following the news, and is down around 40% from its July high. The bank's troubles mirror the wider struggles of the banking sector, with Royal Bank of Canada, Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, and Bank of Nova Scotia also facing difficulties. U.S. Senators to seek Xi meeting, discuss Micron on China visit next week. South China Morning Post. A bipartisan group of U.S. senators is planning to visit China next week and hopes to meet with President Xi Jinping. The senators, including Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Senator Mike Crapo, will discuss a range of issues with Chinese officials, including concerns about Micron Technology's ability to do business in the country. Micron is currently facing an ongoing investigation by the Chinese government's Cybersecurity Administration. The senators also plan to meet with members of the U.S. business community in Shanghai to discuss concerns about the investment climate for U.S. companies in China. The trip comes as the U.S. seeks to ease tensions with China and potentially arrange a meeting between President Joe Biden and President Xi Jinping in November. And that's a wrap for today's news. Ukraine is finding itself needing to rely more on itself as support from Western allies decreases. The country is taking steps towards self-sufficiency, including establishing a domestic industry for military hardware production. However, the U.S. Congress is expected to provide another $24 billion for Ukraine's fight against Russian forces. In Mexico, banners purportedly from the Sinaloa cartel claim that the gang has stopped the production and sale of fentanyl, but experts doubt the veracity of the claim. Meanwhile, Churchill Capital Corp V, a SPAC led by Michael Klein, has announced that it will cease operations after 3 years of activity. 2 Republican members of Congress are calling for a fraud probe into the U.S. TAMP program, and dividend-paying stocks have underperformed this year. In a more positive note, Hungarian scientist Katalin Karikó and U.S. scientist Drew Weissman have been awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for their work enabling mRNA COVID-19 vaccines. Laurentian Bank's CEO has left the bank as it faces troubles, and a group of U.S. senators plans to visit China to discuss various issues, including concerns about Micron Technology's ability to do business in the country. That's all for today, folks. Remember, no matter how tough things may seem, there's always a Nobel Prize waiting for you. Keep shining. And now, over to you, my dear viewers. What are your thoughts on today's news? Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.